homeschool environment. You don't develop that in a school environment.
I've noticed that homeschooled kids, like you said, tend to have higher self-confidence and a sense of who they are and tend to be much less peer dependent.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And in fact, that gets me over to some of the research that has been done on homeschooling. And I think this is really important for parents to understand. There's been a good deal of research conducted on homeschoolers and socialization.
Well, and comfort us, if you would, because you know it is a big deal. When you first start homeschooling, it's kind of scary because everybody else is sending their children to school, and now you've chosen to swim upstream. And so I think having these studies will make it much easier, much more comforting for those people who are homeschooling, and also for our family members who love us and they love our children. They don't want to see us mess up their grandkids.
That's absolutely true. They don't want us to see them messed up, but generally the proof is in the pudding, right?
That's right.
And they will discover after a very short period of time of homeschooling that the kids just surpass all of their expectations. And, you know, with regard to the research on socialization, I've got a number of studies. Oops. I hear a little feedback on the line there. There's a number of studies that have been done, and I'd like to share with you just a few of the concluding statements of them just because I think they're really worthwhile to hear.
Oh, please do.
There was one called Homeschooling and the Question of Socialization that was conducted in 2000 by Richard Medlin in the Peabody Journal of Education. It was reported. And some of his conclusions were that some homeschooled children are taking part in the daily routines of their communities. They're certainly not isolated. In fact, they associate with and feel close to all sorts of people. Homeschooling parents can take much of the credit for this, for with their children's long-term social development in mind, they actively encourage their children to take advantage of social opportunities outside the family. Homeschooled children are acquiring the rules of behavior and systems of beliefs and attitudes they need. They have good self-esteem and are likely to display fewer behavior problems than do other children. They may be more socially mature and have better leadership skills than other children as well, and they appear to be functioning effectively as members of adult society. That's just a really wonderful positive statement about the condition of homeschoolers and socialization.
Now, who did that study?
That was Richard Medlin in the Peabody Journal of Education. The study was called Homeschooling and the Question of Socialization, and you'll be able to access this report through my website.
Through homefires.com.
Through homefires.com.
Okay.
In another study that was done, homeschooling families the conclusion was that homeschooling families are significantly more likely to be civically engaged than our public schooling families, which, you know, just is great because so many times we're accused of because people think that we isolate our kids. They don't understand that we have our children's best interest at heart. And with that in mind, we are going to give them many opportunities to socialize, but under the watchful and loving guidance of parents who can model appropriate social behavior for the kids. And we don't isolate them. We do get them out of the world, and we do get them out volunteering and being civically involved. So that came through in another study by Christian Smith and David Sickink. It was called Is Private School Privatizing? And it looked at homeschoolers in that study as well. There was another one that I thought was really interesting. It was called Social Development in Traditionally Schooled and Home-Educated Children, a Case for Increased Parental Monitoring and Decreased Peer Dominance, which by Michael Brady. And this was conducted in 2003. And this conclusion is wonderful. While peer interaction may be important for successful personality development, the quality of those interactions is equally important. Children that live in a peer-dominant culture tend to be at greater risk for negative peer influences such as rejection and deviance training. Research has demonstrated that increased parental monitoring can increase successful socialization and personality development. The positive increase in social behavior may be due in part to the supervision and regulation of peer group membership and peer activities.
The bottom line on that is who do we really want our children to be learning their values and their people skills from? You know, loving adults, people who care for them, or same-age peers who don't know any more than they do.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And in fact, there are as I said before, many research studies that support this idea. And homeschool children generally are more mature than their school-going counterparts as well. There was another report called Socialization of Homeschool Children by Thomas Smedley, and this one was conducted a number of years ago in 1992, but he directly measured the social maturity of homeschool students and then compared them with those scores to a demographically matched sample of public school students. And here are some of his findings. They indicated that children kept at home are more mature and better socialized than those who were sent to school. The classroom is mostly one-way communication along stereotyped and rote channels, and given the size of classes, few meaningful interchanges are possible on a given day between teacher and individual student. Home educators stress the initiative and individual responsibility of the individual student. The industrial approach to education may place a specified quantity of data before each student. Given the bureaucratic nature of the public school communication environment, however, it cannot logically be claimed to socialize the students. So once again, we're seeing that this false or artificial environment in the classroom does nothing beneficial in terms of giving kids good social skills.
And, because homeschooling is so effective, it's fast. It's one-on-one learning, 1-on-3, 1-on-5 learning is so much faster and more effective than 1-on-20, 1-on-40 learning. I noticed that homeschool students tend to get their studies done in less time, and then there is more time for internships and for group activities. I mean, face it, a lot of the reasons the movie stars and television stars and sports athletes, they homeschool because it's faster, and then they have more time to spend time on what they really love doing.
Oh, that's absolutely true. I know that even with my own children, I think we probably spent on really even at the point in our time when the boys were by choice doing more academic kinds of subjects, the most they were spending was 2 to 3 hours a day, maybe 3 to 5 days a week, just depending. They had the whole rest of the day to figure out what their, to explore their passions, to figure out what they were good at, what they were interested in, and really to become generalists and then specialists because they had the time to devote to those areas that they were most interested in and that they had great skill at. So I think, and as a homeschooling parent, I felt like it was my job during those, because we had so much extra time, to find ways to introduce them to sort of the bounty of life, and by virtue of doing that, it increased their opportunity for socialization with, people of all different ages and abilities and ethnicities and socioeconomic backgrounds, because we're out and about in the community. Anyway, so I agree with that.
It reminds me, in the beginning with homeschooling, when people talked about homeschooling, it was, how are the children going to learn anything? Or academics was the big question. And then it's been so obvious that homeschooling students are doing so well, better than their peers academically. People don't ask that question anymore. And now the question is, what about socialization? But it occurs to me, Diane, that pretty soon the answer to that is going to become so apparent. Yes, I am homeschooling for socialization reasons, because I want to have my children to have more time to socialize out in the real world with people of different ages, where they can learn their people skills and get a chance to figure out who they are and what their values are and what their place is in the world. So I wouldn't be surprised if 5 or 10 years from now people never bring up the socialization question again, because more and more studies are going to prove that is a strength of homeschooling.
Oh, it's a huge strength of homeschooling. It not only... just look at all the things that parents can do with their own kids in terms of socialization, Becky.
Yes, let's talk about that, please.
Yeah, first and foremost, what really bothers me is this idea that parents somehow shouldn't protect their children, or that homeschool children who are home with their parents are going to be overprotected. And I want to tell you something, that almost every species on the planet protects their young children until they are capable of surviving independently on their own. And I would argue that to take children and give them up to the state before they are mature and capable of surviving independently and taking care of themselves it may border on abuse, to my way of thinking. So homeschool parents in terms of socializing, can imbue their kids with their